Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever it is. Welcome back to the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. Thank you for joining. It's going to be a great day. Let's let this beat run a little bit. I just love it. For success, wealth, health, power, money, influence, whatever you do this for. Thanks for joining. Let that run out a little bit. Yes. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Dave Rabior, your host, Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast, where we talk about real estate issues, particularly in the Metro Detroit market. And I started this podcast because as a real estate investor and an agent that does a lot of volume, I have people coming to me from all over the world asking me to help them get involved in Detroit and Metro Detroit in real estate, trying to buy real estate for the purpose of flipping or to buy and hold or to buy and fix the homes and put tenants in and refinance and try to pull their money and all that good stuff. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, man, you know, you're so informative and you always find a way to entertain and you always find a way to come to the conclusions without any fluff. And so to save myself the parrot that I've become, where I have calls like every day from new people or people who I already work with, and I say the same things over and over and over again, I figured I would put on my website blogs, which I've started to do, and you can get those at www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. And then I also, for people who don't want to read or people that don't have time or people who like to go to the gym and listen to podcasts in their headphones or whatever, I decided to do a podcast to make it easier for just anyone to enjoy what we do and how we do things, and, you know, just make it easy as possible for people to enjoy and learn and empower and just learn the things that are so important for people. And there's a lot of investors I work with that have the fundamentals down, but they still have questions, and those questions are valid. And I have a lot of people who are brand new who want to get into this stuff, and they really want to get in depth about the fundamentals all the way up to the advanced stuff. And I try to, you know, limit people versus what knowledge they have. And I don't want to make things too controversial or too hard to understand, or, you know, I just try to keep it simple so that people can follow along. And as you advance in your level of knowledge and your level of experience, then the conversations, they change, you know, depending on what you require or what you decide that you want to learn about or at what pace you go. I mean, really, I leave it open for investors, new and experienced, to come to me, and I allow myself to be what they expect, which is someone who they can depend on, someone who they can go to for knowledge, and someone who they put, quote unquote, on their power team. You know, I want to be somebody for you that you look to for advice on any real estate related thing and just in life. You know, I enjoy being friends and on good terms with people, and I enjoy the relationships that I build and growing relationships for the future. And I think it's the most valuable thing in business is to, you know, let people know that you're not just doing business with them because you want to make money. I mean, yeah, I enjoy making money on real estate, and I enjoy all the things that I do, and I enjoy knowing that my future is uncapped and it's all, you know, dependent on my performance and what I do. But ultimately, yeah, I get to do what I love and I make money for it, right? But I also get to do what I love, and I get to teach people how to change their life and be better. And that's ultimately why I'm doing this. If I wasn't interested in doing that, I would just continue to buy rentals. I'd continue to flip houses, and I'd continue to look for off-market opportunities to sell for a fee. And I wouldn't care about, you know, people growing or developing or becoming better, because then you'd be my competition. And if I was a selfish person, I wouldn't want anyone to be my competition. I'd want all of the cake for myself, and I'd want to eat it too. And unfortunately in this life, there are a lot of people that do that. There's a lot of people that solely have their best interests in mind, and even so to the point where they pretend to be your friend or your loved one or your family or whatever. And they do that as a crutch to basically solidify their own personal agendas in business and in life. And people get caught up in that. And it can be a very slippery and dangerous slope for a lot of people, And so today, we're going to get into a lot of podcasts where we talk about all of the issues, how to buy things and how to sell things and how to make them perform and all of the tips and tricks and whatnots. But there's really no cheat code to any of this stuff, right? The only way to really get started as an entrepreneur for yourself, it starts with mindset. And that's what we're going to talk about today is mindset. Like, who are you? And I asked that on the last episode. Who are you and what kind of person do you want to be? That's the most important thing to figure out before you get into anything where you're quote unquote your own boss or you're deciding your own future, right? If you don't have the right mindset and you're not motivated to be your 100% best at all times, you can't really blame yourself or anyone else. If you're not performing at absolutely the best level that you can't expect to achieve the results of someone who's outworking you every single day. And when I got into real estate, my mindset has always been different than others. And the reason for that is I grew up in a situation where my mom, she was a beautician or, she did hair, right? And my dad, he really couldn't hold a job. He had a problem with alcoholism and, he was a guy who could fix anything and he could woo every woman that he met. And he was so, romantic and funny and nice and everything. But personally, like he just couldn't be an adult and he couldn't be a father, at any kind of level because he was always more concerned with like his own personal life and having fun and drinking beers with the buddies and throwing back shots, which progressively got worse as the years went by. And he ultimately passed away from liver failure from alcoholism. But during the time that he was alive, I mean, he truly like lived his best life until he got to the point where he couldn't anymore. And then the depression kind of, it seeped in from there and it slowly, mentally drained him to the point where he was just drinking so much he couldn't even perform in life. But, my parents were divorced when I was young and my mom and dad split and my mom married a new guy who's my stepdad who growing up, man, like I always thought he was such like a drill sergeant. He was such a jerk, and he just wanted us to just never have time to sit around. He always had jobs for us to do. He always demanded that we, made our bed and cleaned our room and cleaned up every single mess. And he made us work in the yard and he made us work on all these projects and, cut the grass. And like, while all of our friends were playing in the summertime and having a good old time in their pools and doing this and that and running around, we had responsibilities that we were expected to handle. And when I was a kid, I hated that. I thought that he was just the worst guy. And why would you make us be slaves for you and this and that? But as I got older, I realized that the only way that you're going to be successful just in life is by starting with the fundamentals of taking ownership of yourself, requiring yourself to live to a certain standard, handling things like it starts as simple as just making your bed in the morning. You get up out of bed and, you walk away from an unmade bed to an unmade life, and you're disheveled from the very beginning if you can't even handle the basics in your life. And mindset is like 100% the most important thing that you could ever do if you want to be successful in general. That doesn't matter if you're going to work for someone else or you're a clock puncher or you're a salaried employee or you're a salesperson or you're an entrepreneur where you're out there slaying it for yourself and trying to make the best life for yourself that you can on your own terms. But without the mindset, without being 100% dedicated to yourself and devoted to yourself and looking at yourself and saying, hey, every day I'm going to go out and conquer the world. I need to get up, get out and get something. And I'm not going to do it by sitting down, making excuses or cutting corners or just crying about all these things you can't control. So where we're going to go with this podcast is, mindset. So the mindset of someone who is going to get up every day, look at their life and decide that they're in control of it is the mindset of a winner, right? And you have to look at yourself deeply, as a human being and say, like, what kind of person am I and what am I missing in myself that is keeping me from the success that I ultimately feel like I deserve. And a lot of people, they're really close to being able to go out and like just handle their own affairs without any interference or training or anything. But all of us still need to, look at other people in our life that are successful and kind of mold ourselves and compare ourselves to people who are more successful so that we can kind of get other things that they do that might be good to implement into our lives to make us be better. And when you're talking about mindset, you have to be able to wake up every day and you have to know, like in your mind, that you are going to conquer and you're going to do what you want to do and nobody is going to stop you. And, for some people, it's kind of hard because they don't have enough stuff going on in their life that will motivate them to motivate themselves. And some people do need that. They need someone to like hold them accountable or someone to create a game plan for them. And it's like going to the gym and getting with a personal trainer where like, could you go to the gym and get on the treadmill? Yeah. Could you lift weights for yourself? Of course you could. Could you, put together some sort of a workout routine based on, what you found online or videos that you watch on TikTok or whatever? Yeah. But some people, even though they have all of those things at their disposal, though they have all of those things and they can go online and get access to any information that they want, they can go to their friends who, maybe they got a buddy who's jacked, he's in the gym every single day and the guy could give them some good tips. Like they have access to all that stuff, but they just don't do that. And they sit there and they think, well, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to be better. I'm going to work out. I'm going to this, I'm going to that, but they just never do it. And they have access to all this information. So eventually when they finally get good and fed up and they decide like, hey, now I'm changing my life, which, let's say 25% of people actually get so aggravated they stand up one day and say, I'm going to change my life. I'm done with the same old same and it's not working for me. So now it's time for me to change and I'm going to do something different and I'm going to make myself uncomfortable because if I don't make myself uncomfortable, I'm just going to continue to be upset with myself or feel sad inside or have, certain things about themselves that make them self-conscious or whatever. But eventually they go to someone who they like or someone who they look up to and they ask for the help. And that person, at that point can give you all of the information. They can make you a meal plan. They could say, hey, meet me every week on Monday and Thursdays, and we're going to do upper and lower body. And I'm going to give you a whole routine and I'm going to tell you all this stuff and whatever. And they'll get to the point where they get someone to invest that kind of time in them and somebody who's willing to put aside their own personal time to kind of help you. And they'll go to them for that, but then they'll never do anything about it, And that's the biggest thing about people that I see all the time is you get all these great ideas and you read all this stuff, you watch videos and inside, you're motivating yourself and saying like, I could do this. I can do this. I want to do this. And then you just never do, Why do people do that? I don't know. But having that person that to go to, you can go to them like the boy who cried wolf only so many times before they're like, hey man, I put together personal time to try to help you. And like, you just blew it off like 3-4 times. Now I'm not even going to help you anymore. And eventually that person's not going to answer your calls anymore. They're not going to really respond or be responsive to your needs anymore. And you have to really look at life in that way. Nobody is going to do this for you. And you might have people in your life that are willing to help you when you go to them. But if you're not ready to put that plan into action, you can't expect anybody to be there for you every time that you just come up with this cockamamie idea about what you're going to do, but you never execute on that. It's not fair for you to believe that someone should even give you that kind of time if you're not willing to give that time to yourself, right? So that's the problem with a lot of people is like mindset. Like, can you get up every day and say, I'm going to be in control of my day? And can you put structure in your day? And I'm going to make you an example. So growing up, there is no silver spoon. I say this all the time, but like nobody was in my life telling me I was going to be nobody, right? I just decided when I was young that I was going to just do whatever I wanted to. And until I was probably 21 years old, I didn't make very good decisions about what I was going to do and who I was going to be and who I was going to run with and what kind of bad habits I was going to pick up. I did really dumb stuff because I was a kid and I didn't know any better. And, you know, my mom worked full time and she wasn't home as much as, you know, some people's parents were. And my stepdad, you know, he was working full time because they had kids to take care of and they had responsibilities to take care of. And like, the only way to do that is to get up off your butt and go to work and make some money. And that's what they had. My stepdad drove a truck and my mom cut hair for a living. And though those may not be the most executive position or the most flashy and fancy things, like they made a good living doing that, enough to where they could afford a house and take care of kids, you know. And like, we didn't go without, but we definitely didn't have all of the nicest stuff. But in relation to like my life now I'm, you know, doing really well financially, and I do really well just in general. And like, I still live a very modest life. I have no debt. I own everything that I have, and anything that I do have like healthy debt on is something that I have to have, like my personal home. Like, can I pay it off? Yeah. I mean, I only owe a small balance on it, but when you get to be an entrepreneur, you got to have things to write off. In real estate, you know, as we get into these podcasts, we'll start talking more about why you have to have credit and you have to have debt, or else you're going to have a big problem trying to excel or advance in life. You just have to have it. But, you know, growing up in life for me, you know, I got into the wrong crowd. You know, I wanted to have like new tennis shoes and I wanted to have a gold chain and I wanted to, you know, live this, you know, rapper lifestyle thing that, you know, kids my age wanted to do back in the 90s, because I'm 44 years old. I graduated from high school in 1998. So in Detroit in the late 80s and all the way until, you know, 1999, you know, the city was a lot different than it is now, and the suburbs too, you know, and it was pretty tough. There was a lot of problems here. There was a lot of drugs and gangs and violent stuff going on, and it was a lot different than it is now. And young people used to get away with a lot more stuff back then. So naturally, I'm looking at older people that, you know, I grew up around that were doing things that weren't necessarily the right things. And, you know, it was easy and quick money. So I decided like, hey, I want to have nice stuff. So that's what I decided to do. And, you know, during that time, you know, when you're the guy, you think everybody's your friend and you think everybody's down for you and all that. But then when things go wrong and you end up in a jail cell because you made stupid decisions, you find out quickly, like, none of those people give two squirts about you at all. They don't care. They don't care where you're going. They don't care what you're doing. Only when you have something for them and they can get gratification in some way, or they can make money off you, or they can benefit from you in some way, yeah, they're your buddy. But once you're down and out, they're not, you know. So I had to learn very quickly from a mindset standpoint. I didn't have anybody in my life that was going to save the day, right? Like, my parents were fed up and discouraged with me because I made stupid decisions and I continued to just run around in the streets and act like a dummy. And my dad really just had no capability of even contributing on that level as a parent. So when I got to be 18 years old, you know, obviously my family was basically like, you got to get out of here. You can't. Once I was done with high school, they're like, you got to go. So I had to go off on my own and I had to figure it out. And when you go off on your own and you realize that you don't have anybody to go to, like when you have problems, you don't have anyone to ask for money when you need it, you start figuring it out really quick. And that's what I think is the most healthy lesson that you can teach to any young person today. Stop enabling them and giving them things every time they fall down. Make them feel it, make them eat it, make them taste that, and make them absorb it. And then watch them figure it out. All these people who, you know, things go wrong and they just can't seem to like figure it out, that's because someone always comes in and throws them a rope. Like, while right before they're about to go underwater, someone throws them a rope almost every time. It's like that show Intervention. You know, a lot of those dope fiends on there wouldn't be as bad of a dope fiend if they didn't have so many people enabling them. And then when they put them in a room and tell them, hey, if you don't go to rehab, I'm not going to give you anything or pay your cell phone bill or drive you anywhere. A lot of them, they have no choice at that point but to succumb to the fact that they already know that they're stupid. They already know that they've done horrible things to their family and that they lie and they're a drug addict or they're an alcoholic or whatever. And once they know that their family is out, like they have no choice but to either decide to go off on their own and fend for themselves. And most of them at that point, they're so screwed up, they don't even have a chance. Or they have to go to rehab and get cleaned up because their family is done with them. And I think that's like the most valuable thing that you can do to certain people in that in that circumstance. And this is coming from a guy who has a brother who passed away from a drug overdose, who I dealt with this stuff with him for years. And I have a sister who has her problems as well. And we haven't spoken for probably over 10 years now because, I eliminate people from my life that are, they have so many problems and they just refuse to change them. And they don't want to be different, but they want everyone to just like deal with them in the way they are, which is a complete train wreck. So I won't do that. But, the mindset for me as I got older, and I'm sharing this with you guys because I want you to understand, I know what it's like, and I'm qualified to say this stuff based on my own personal life that I had to go through. So I was off on my own at 18. I had to figure out where I was going to go. My mom just kicked me right out into the street and said, "You're not my problem. You do what you got to do." And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, to be honest with you. So I went to go live with a friend of mine who got an apartment, and we moved in together. Well, now I had free reign to just be a complete moron and have no supervision. And so that's what I did until the point where I got myself into a whole bunch of trouble and ended up having to go into the jail and have to, be faced with a really high bond and no money and no help. And I sat in the jail. I think I got put in there around Thanksgiving, and I didn't get out of jail until the summertime, I think, almost of the next following year. And they had kept me in there for so long, they finally gave me a bond reduction hearing and they let me out. And fortunately, my grandma, rest in peace, she felt bad and came in and bailed me out for the $5,000 or whatever it was. And at that point, I remember that day was the day that changed my entire life for the better. I remember calling my dad and saying, they're going to give me a reduced bond and I've been in here for months and I just need to get out of here. They're telling me I'm going to go to jail for a long time. And this was over stupid stuff, marijuana stuff when I was a kid in Michigan. Now it's all legal. And what I got in trouble for then, it wouldn't even been a thing, but nowadays it's different. Back then, over one joint, you could go to jail, you could go on probation and all this stuff. And I don't even use, marijuana anymore, but in my younger days I did, and I sold it to people, and that was how I made money because I was a dumb kid and it was fast cash. And hey, I'm not going to deny it or lie about it. That's what I did. So I finally got set up by a friend who got in trouble for something. He set me up. They did a bust on me. They raided my apartment that I lived in, and fortunately there was nothing in there. But with what they had on me, I got busted, and I went to jail, and I went that route. So finally, the day that changed my life was I called my dad, who basically rarely did anything for me in my life, but this time he convinced my grandmother to get me the money I needed, and he came down and he bailed me out. Well, he bailed me out, and then he immediately jumped in his car and left. So in the Macomb County Jail, where I live in Michigan, they don't just let you right out. So they decided to let me out like 4:30 in the morning the following day. And that stay in jail, like when I went in there, I had like winter clothes on. When I came out, it was like summertime, right? So I have like a coat and pants and a sweatshirt, hoodie or whatever. And they let me out of the jail like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I walk out, and anyone who knows about Macomb County Jail, like there's nowhere to really walk to, there. You got to walk pretty far to get anywhere of anywhere to eat anything or whatever. It's kind of away from things. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, it's the year 2000, like I had no cell phone. Like people still had pagers then, beepers. And, I'm standing there in front of the jail, 5 o'clock in the morning. It's dark outside, and I got $50 in my pocket to my name, and I got nowhere to go. I had literally nowhere to go. I didn't even know who I would call to even figure out where I was going to go to sleep one day. I had no idea. So I have no choice but to start walking down Groesbeck, highway in Mount Clemens, Clinton Township area. And I'm walking south toward where I resided, at the time, thinking, what am I going to do? I have nowhere to live. I have nowhere to go. I don't know how am I even going to eat? I only have $50. I can't get involved in the illegal stuff because then if I get caught again, I'm for sure going to go to prison over some marijuana, which to me at the time was ridiculous. And nowadays it wouldn't even be a thing. But, at the time it was a big deal, and they took it real serious, and they were calling me all kinds of stuff like I'm some big time kingpin or something. I'm just a guy selling little dime bags of weed and to people and half ounces or whatever. I was like no kingpin. I'm like at best a corner boy at the time, right? So I'm walking in. Fortunately, I get to this payphone, which I know those don't exist anymore, but I get to this payphone and I call this girl I know and said, hey, I just got out of jail and I have nowhere to go. Well, I knew she was on Section 8 and I knew that where she lived, she wasn't paying the rent. And I told her, like, if you let me come stay with you, I'll help you pay all of your utilities and you won't have to do that. As long as Section 8 pays the rent, I'll take care of everything. And she said, come over and you can stay a couple of days and we'll figure it out. And it turned out where I stayed with her for a little bit until I started figuring out what I was going to do, which led me to the mindset that I have today. That was when I realized, like, I got nobody to change my life. I got nobody to help me. I had nobody to give me any money, and I had to figure that out. And I had to figure it out before that $50 was gone, and I was able to do that. I was able to, call some people, get some employment, start working. And at that point, I realized like the only thing I got left is to just put as many hours as I can. I got to get my own place. I got to get my own car. I got to get everything going because they took everything from me when I got in trouble. They took everything. They took my car. They took all my money except $50. They took everything. And here I am, at the time I was 20 years old, I think. And, all my friends I looked up to were like street guys, all of them. There was like no one I knew who wasn't a street guy. And when I was, in the business of being a dummy, everybody wanted to be my friend. Everybody wanted to come around, smoke, buy stuff from me, whatever, hang out, go to the bars. And I had a fake ID so I could go into anything I wanted to. And it was like living this life, which as a kid, you're like, man, that was such a great life. So many good times, but it really wasn't. It was being a moron at a level that you can't even, like when you get older, you look back like, man, I was so dumb. Such a dumb idiot kid to get involved in this stuff. But it created this mindset where I realized like I am the only person who's going to change my life. Nobody else is going to do it. And I had to really quickly figure out like what I was going to do. And we're talking about from a kid who I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. I was fitting in with a crowd of people who like had no ambition but to just live for each day and drugs and violent stuff and gang stuff and guns and all this dumb stuff, that we involved ourselves in because we wanted to be, gangsters and street guys and all this stuff. And now here we are, decades later, and I look back and, it made me who I am because I realized I was stupid and I had to change my life. But, I wish I would have never wasted that time doing that. I wish I would have just been normal and stayed in, graduated from school like I did and then went to college and figured something out because, it cost me a period of time from the age of like 20 till I was probably 25 where, I was working as much as I could and make as much money as I could. But, ultimately that struggle is real and you're never really going to get ahead doing that. And I had to figure it out. And that was when, 2009 came, market crashed. I got involved in buying cheap rental properties and like my life kind of, spiraled upward from there. But, in the time from when I was 20 years old until I was, probably 28 or something like that, it was like really, really tough. But I met my wife when I was 23 or 24 years old, something like that. And we've been together now for over 20 years. And when we met, she had 2 kids and they were 7 and 4. And now they're 28 and 25. And I have a grandson by my oldest daughter, which is probably one of the happiest moments of my entire life. And, those 2 girls and my wife saved my life because I had to figure out like how to be a man. And I refused to be like my dad. I wanted to be there. And if I was going to be in those kids' life, I wanted to make sure that I was a role model for them, that I influenced them in the right way. And I wanted to make sure that my wife, if we decide to have kids of our own, which we never ultimately did, but, it is what it is. My kids are my kids and I love them just like they're my own, DNA. It doesn't matter to me. And I have all these god kids. But anyway, I got involved with her And, I was in the music business at that time and doing, music production and music of my own. And we were doing pretty good with that. And, that's a story for another day. But, I decided like, hey, at some point I gotta figure out how to be someone who can take care of his family. So if my wife can't work and she wants to have a baby, I can take care of her. And that's when I, started thinking, being a clock punching idiot for some company that doesn't care about me is never going to get me what I need to do. And I got into the auto parts business and I got my first sales job. And then I used that sales job to get hired for a better company for a better job. And then after 2 or 3 years, I, got hired for another company that was throwing all the money at me because they knew I was really good. And then I leveraged that and then on and on and on. So I realized quick, like no one's there for me. No one cares. Companies don't care. I'm going to work really hard. And if they're not going to give me what I want, then I'm going to go to another company and I'm going to get them to give me what I need to, because ultimately the shelf life of a salesperson for somebody else is only like 2, 3, 4 years, maybe. And you go from hero to zero so quickly when you do that job. So I leveraged myself up the ladder knowing that eventually I was going to get to be an entrepreneur. And that's what I did. But the reason for that is I knew, and I put myself in this position on purpose. Like I needed to know that like everyone was dependent on me so I could not fail. And I already know, and I already knew at the time, like there's no one for me to go to for help. So I got to figure it out. And I put myself in that position because I perform under pressure and I love it. I just thrive on it. Whereas other people, when it gets a lot of pressure, they shut down and they curl up in a little ball and, the world closes in on them and stuff. And it's like, it doesn't mean that you can't be in the mindset of a successful person when you get in that role. It means that you have to be able to identify that you have a flaw and be willing to change it. And mindset, for me was because I had no other choice. Whereas some people, they have a choice and they just choose to be dominant. They choose to be a wolf and they choose to take what they want. And they won't accept any less. And you have other people that have the ability to be dominant or be an entrepreneur and be in control of their life, but they just are so afraid. They have like analysis paralysis where they just look at all this stuff and then they just think about it and think about it and think about it and they just never do anything. And that's the most dangerous type of person to themselves because you have the potential to do more and you are making it to where you can't. No one's stopping you but you. And you have to break that. And if you're somebody who, never really got things going and you want to make excuses about it, I don't want to hear it. Let's be honest. Like I've seen guys come here from other countries. When I was in the auto parts business in Detroit, a lot of the auto shops and liquor stores are owned by Chaldeans or Arabs. I saw guys get off the boat with nothing but a handbag with like a day or two worth of stuff in there. And literally within 2 years, they're driving an Escalade and got their own auto shop. Guys who couldn't even speak English and women, who couldn't even speak English. They came to the United States with a dream and a bag with whatever they had. And within 3 to 5 years, they're doing better than you. There's no excuse. You have no excuse. You have no excuse. We have people coming here as immigrants without even legal citizenship. And they're doing better than some of you guys, right? And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you need to identify that and you have to make a choice. Do you want to be average, subpar, or below? Or do you want to be in control of your life? You have to make that decision. And nobody's going to do it for you. And making excuses for it is not going to help you with anything. It's not, right? So stop making excuses, suck it up, and decide, who am I? Am I going to be the clock puncher or am I going to be the boss? Am I going to be the CEO or am I going to be the janitor? That's up to you. And I don't want to hear about people talking about, racial stuff and whatever. It doesn't matter. I know really successful guys I grew up with of all different ethnicities that came from worse backgrounds than me that are as successful or more successful than me that literally went through the same environment than me and they aren't white. Because I'm a white guy, right? So does it really matter? If you want to be successful, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. You go out and you work hard and you outwork your competition. You show up earlier, you stay later, you give more focus, you try harder, you care more, and you influence people around you by your hard work and your work ethic and stuff like that. And if you really want to be successful, nobody can stop you. Literally no one can. This is America. Think about this. You have people in this country who literally come from third world countries and they they come here and drive Uber for 12 to 20 hours a day for, a year or 2 or 3 years, long enough it takes them to be able to get their own stuff. And then they start their own car service, or they, open their own business or whatever. And they're performing in life. And they came here as an immigrant who could barely speak the language and stuff. And we have people that sit here that come from this country that literally had all of the, the meat and potatoes and all of the favors and all of the good stuff. And they sit there and make excuses for why they can't do stuff. I have an uncle, he did 13 years in prison for, he had a bunch of problems, but he did some stuff, dumb stuff, and he went to prison for 13 years. And I kept in contact with him for the whole time, right? Because nobody talked to him. Hardly anyone did. Everyone forgot about him, but this is my uncle and we're not that far apart in age. And I love him, So I kept in contact with him, and I gave him money on his commissary and whatever. And he got out of prison. Now you're talking about a guy who had an extremely bad drinking problem and violence and all that stuff. He went to prison. In prison, he decided that he wasn't going to be like that anymore. And he's been clean and sober for 20 years now. He gets out of prison, and within 2 years, mind you, he comes out of prison with absolutely nothing, right? He goes to live with my aunt because that's the only place that he could go that the parole board would allow him to go to. And within 2 years, he literally got his credit score up to 750. He worked real hard. He bought himself a vehicle. He got good credit going. He started buying all of his tools because he was a contractor before he went away, right? And he's one of the best ones I've ever had. He got all of his stuff together. He got his tools together. And after a couple of years, when he was getting off parole, as soon as they cut him loose, he started his own business as a contractor. And then he got everything going. He was making great money, all that stuff. And you know what happens? He has a stroke out of the blue. He's 50 years old. He has a stroke. And the stroke creates this aneurysm in his brain that affects his ability to speak, right? So now he can't even talk anymore. And this man, it's been 2 years now, and he's completely normal again. They told him, you may not ever talk again. But you know what? He said, nope, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to get up every day, get on my feet. I'm going to work. I'm going to talk. I'm going to go to speech therapy. I'm going to do all of these things I got to do. And because he refused to sit there and just accept his fate, now he's almost, I say he's 90%, aside from a stutter here and there, he's pretty much back to normal. Where I had a influential person in my life who had a stroke, lost his whole left side, and he was only 58 years old. And they told him if he worked really hard, he could get his left side back, and he didn't do anything. And he died 3 years later in a nursing home because he just decided he didn't want to try because he had depression from all kinds of different things or whatever. But the moral of the story is people who have no chance have a better chance than someone who doesn't try. Think about that for a second, because excuses are going to get you nowhere. And you have to be able to look in the mirror and determine at some point, one day, I'm going to be dominant at something. Or you're going to figure out what it is, and you're going to say, I'm going to be dominant at real estate. I'm going to be dominant as a CEO. I'm going to be dominant in sales. I'm going to be dominant as a professional athlete. I'm going to be dominant as a personal trainer, whatever it is. Because I'll tell you right now, I have investors, and I have one. She's a girl from California. She's only 24 years old. She's younger than my youngest daughter. And she's already bought 6 properties in one, not even a year. 6, right? Think about that. 24. Where do you think she's going to be when she's 40, 50, 60? You think she's going to be sitting around making excuses for why her life's not good? I don't think so. But you got people who are the age of 65 that, go to retirement and they have nothing. Whose fault is that really? It's yours. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It means that if you're not comfortable and you don't want to live that way, you need to figure out something that's going to work for you, and you need to go after it. Somebody's going to have to do it. And if you're not going to do it, life is just going to pass you by. And you don't get a right to be upset about your life not being what it needs to be when you're the one that controls what your life is going to be. You don't get that. So to be successful in real estate, and I know this is, it may or may not be on topic, but I think that before I get into talking and before I waste time, trying to get you all fired up about, being an investor, it starts with yourself. It starts with, being accountable to yourself and deciding that you're the man. I wake up every day and I think that to myself, not in a cocky way, but I look at myself you're the man. You're the one who is in control of your good and your bad days. You're the one that's in control of how much money you make or how much you don't. You're the one in control of where you go, when you go, how you go, and how long you stay there. To me, I'm the man. I'm everywhere. I'm every place I want to be in life. And that's all because I decided that I wasn't going to sit around and make excuses for stuff. And that's what I want people to understand. You can't make excuses. Just get up off your ass and go do something. That's it. There's no other way to say it. Okay. And if you're willing to, educate yourself, and you're willing to do the work, and you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get to it, and you're willing to ask the questions, and you're willing to do the math, and you're willing to read the information, and you're willing to have business related conversations that are productive, I want to be your friend. I want to be your real estate person. I want to be an investor partner with you. I want to be whatever it is that you want to be, because there's so little people in this world that really you can look at them and say, like, that person is someone who I want to do business with. That's someone who I want to be friends with him. Or her or them. Because that's the only people I surround myself with. I don't surround myself with people who aren't trying to do what's best for themselves at all times. I don't do it. And the other thing I want to say before I close this up is you have to determine, if you really want to get ahead in life, you have to look around you, and you have to look at the people who are parasites of your time and parasites of your heart and parasites of your soul and your well-being. You have to look at that, and you have to identify it. And even if they're your family, it doesn't mean you can't love them. It doesn't mean that you don't have to see them anymore. But what it does mean is you need to figure out a way to eliminate them and push them away from your life as far as you can, because those people will be the ones that bring you down every single time. Every time that you try to get ahead, they're going to have a negative thing to say about it. Or every time that you get ahead, they're going to be trying to get money from you, or they're going to be trying to create all these problems, be volatile in your life. And they're just going to be, just sucking all of the good nature out of you. And you don't have enough to go around. And that's okay. Okay. Think about this before I close out this show. You only have 24 hours in a day. Let's look at that for what it is. 24 hours in a day. How many hours do you sleep? Let's say you sleep 8 hours, which I wish I could. I'm probably at 6. Okay. So now there's 8 hours gone. And then you have commuting to and from wherever you go to your job, right? Let's call that 45 minutes. So that's another hour and a half. And then you got, eating meals and prepping for your day and all that stuff. That leaves you with like maybe, I don't know, let's add your work day on top of that, right? Let's say you work 8 hours and you work 8 hours and you sleep 8 hours. That's 16 hours. And then let's call it another 2 hours a day for eating and commuting. Okay, that's 18 hours. So that leaves 6 hours left in a day. 6 hours to spend time with your family, entertain yourself, watch a little TV, get caught up on reading, focus on your life, whatever it is that you do, meditate, work out, whatever. 6 hours a day. You got to be really closed off with that 6 hours of your life. And that's how I think about things. Like, I probably have 4 hours a day that I can spend doing what I want to do. And that usually is spending time with my family, my godkids, my grandkid, watching TV with my wife or whatever, catching up on a few, Hulu shows or Netflix things, or, we like to binge watch shows. And I enjoy spending time with my wife. And then at 4 hours, like, maybe she likes to go to bed before me. So it works out great. So she goes to bed and I have maybe like another hour and a half, 2 hours. And that's where I, hop onto YouTube, or I read a little bit, or I go and check out data or whatever. I'm a nerd about the numbers. So that's when I have my little time to just unwind, meditate, and take in what I want to take in. And that's it. So if I'm going to give you time, with that being said, when I only have 4 hours, maybe you have 6 hours a day, you better be worth that time. It doesn't mean you need to give me something, or like I need to be benefiting from you. Like, it needs to be a genuine relationship where you just genuinely care about how I'm doing, how my life is, or it needs to be something productive in some way, or it needs to be with friends the type of friends that call you for nothing, right? The ones that call you up and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" No, I don't want to talk about problems. I don't want to talk about, you helping me or borrowing money. I'm just like, what's up, man? How you doing? You want to have a beer or something? Hey, have you went fishing lately? Which everyone knows I'm like a fishaholic, and I fish and I have a show and all that aside from the podcast. But and Cheap Pop, that's called Great Lakes Extreme Outdoors. That's coming up this year. And, everyone knows that I like to hunt and fish and be outside and do all that stuff. So the 4 hours a day that I get, or maybe 5 sometimes, because I kind of give myself a little time, like that's my time. That's the time that I enjoy the most for myself. I put myself through this boot camp every single day where I have to perform and I have to be the best I can be, and I have to be influential, and I have to be the pillar of my family, and I have to be that tree in the front yard that everybody lays all of their stuff on, saying, hey, that tree's big and strong and it'll never fall over. I got to be that. So if I'm going to be that, I need to have a few hours for myself, and you deserve it too. So you don't spend that time with people who are negative, that are parasites of your time, your soul, your well-being. You have to figure out a way to eliminate them. Doesn't mean you can't love them, but you need to love them from a distance and keep them out of your way, because ultimately you'll never be productive if you continue to allow people to suck you dry for your emotions, money, time, and efforts. You can't do it. Okay, so I'm going to leave this where it is. Mindset is waking up every day, determining who you are, what you want to be, what you're going to do, and actually getting up off your butt, making your feet move, and doing something every day, and becoming rejection proof, and putting those activities to work every single day. And if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to invest yourself 100% in yourself, like you do other things in your life, how can you really fail? How could you fail? If you go to work every single day for some company and you achieve results for them to the point where they continue to employ you year after year after year, and every year you get a raise, or every couple of years you get a raise, and you get the accommodations and the accolades, and everybody thinks that you're pretty good at your job. Like, if you can do that for somebody else, why are you not doing that for yourself? You already have the mindset. You're just not putting it to work. So hopefully, that sparks a little bit of brain power with a lot of you, little activity, stirs you up in the soul a little bit, because I'm not perfect, not by any means, and I'll never claim to be. I'm not the best at everything. I don't run the fastest. I don't jump the highest. I've never been the prettiest. I don't have the nicest cars. I don't wear the fancy jewelry. I don't have Gucci shoes. I don't care about any of those things. All I care about is like doing what I got to do to take care of my family and be the best man I can be, so that if I die one day, or when I do die, let me rephrase this. At the point where I decide I'm going to pass away, or somebody decides that will be my day, I will call my life a success. If people say, I genuinely don't know what I'll do without that person in my life. Not because I gave them money, not because I supported them all the time, because I was genuinely someone who they looked up to or went to for advice, or considered to be genuinely a friend, sincerely a friend that cared about them and that was always there for them when they needed it, whether it would be my kids, my godkids, my friends, my wife, anybody around me. If when I die, people say, I don't know how I'll go on without that person in my life because he was such an influential person in my happiness, I will declare my life a complete win from there. It means nothing. The money means nothing. Success, means nothing. Once you're dead, you're dead. And I've seen it happen, and I'll end it with this. I've seen people who had nothing and people that were influential pass away, and I've went to their funerals. And for a few days after they die, people, they're sad, and they're posting on socials, and they're, cry emojiing, and they're pouring their hearts out about that person, and God bless them because they influence people and they're that upset, and emotional because they loved them that much. And I respect it. But all this stuff happens when somebody passes away, and all these people, they cry and they talk and they share, stories and whatever. And then their funeral comes, and people come and they cry, and there's a beautiful service, and there's flowers, and sometimes there's an urn, and sometimes there's a casket, or sometimes there's nothing at all, and it's just a memorial service. And then it's done. Right then, it's done. And everybody goes home. And maybe for a day or two, they're sad. Or maybe for a long time, they celebrate your life. And some people will, and that's great. but you're gone. And all the stuff that you did in your life, money and the houses and the cars and the jewelry and all that stuff, gets divvied up amongst whoever it is that you decide is going to get it. Hopefully you have a trust. I highly recommend, because if not, the buzzards begin, they start swarming in. But once it's all done, it's done. People go home and your life is over just like that. And it doesn't matter what you had at the time or what you're giving up. All it matters is, like, can the people in your life who you love and take care of and that wholeheartedly, like, you really want the best for them, can they continue on without you in their life, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially? Can they? Did you put them in a position to do that? Because if you didn't, I feel like you're doing a disservice to those people. You love them, right? And anything that you do in this world, like, yeah, your money's to enjoy, and the items that you have are to enjoy, and there's no denying that, right? But at the end of the day, when you're gone, you're gone. You can't take it with you. So you might as well leave as much as you can for people that been holding it down for you, and make sure that they're all right. Because without that, you got nothing. Because the money don't mean nothing. The memories are the most important thing. But if you can leave a little bit behind for them too, so that they can go on without any kind of financial crisis for a period of time after you leave this world, which I know I'm going to do for my family. If you can do that, you should. But if you don't, focus your time on creating relationships with people that actually love and care about you, that don't destroy you from the inside or be a parasite of your happiness, time, or anything like that. So keep that in mind. I appreciate you guys listening. Episode 2 of the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. My name's Dave Rabior, Detroit's finest investment agent. Hit me up, www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. Look me up on Facebook. Look me up on Instagram, Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest. You can find me everywhere. Appreciate you listening. Have a good day. Have a good week. And we'll be back soon with a new podcast number 3.